I want you to imagine moving your family like 3 times a year.
Which is incredibly stressful on its own, right?
Oh, exactly. But, I mean, you aren't uprooting your children for, a new corporate job or some military deployment.
Right.
You are packing boxes in the middle of the night because a mysterious, completely unmarked scrap of paper arrived in your mail.
Just a total disruption of reality.
Yeah, and this paper is basically telling you that a centuries-old spiritual vendetta is finally catching up to your household.
Wow.
So you're treating your suburban life like a witness protection program because you actually believe you're being hunted by a myth.
It completely shatters the baseline of reality for everyone involved. I mean, when a parent's internal obsession bleeds out and dictates the physical movements of a family, it creates an environment where psychological trauma and folklore don't just overlap. They become entirely indistinguishable from one another.
Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are taking you through a really sprawling, multi-generational account that sits right at that terrifying intersection.
It's a fascinating one.
It really is. So this comes to us from a popular Thai program called The Ghost Radio. It was originally shared by a caller named Jane, who lives in New Zealand.
Right.
And our mission today is to piece together a story that features a fractured family, ancient indigenous mythology, physical artifacts, and this inescapable cycle of karmic revenge.
And we are really treating this as a fascinating cultural and psychological case study.
Absolutely.
Because what Jane presents to the audience, it's not just a straightforward haunting.
No, not at all.
It's an incredibly layered narrative.
Yeah.
It shows us what happens when ancient beliefs are physically invited into a deeply vulnerable modern home.
Right.
And to understand the explosive, literal fire that consumes this family at the climax, we have to look at the initial spark.
Yeah, and that spark comes directly from the biological father.
Which is unexpected, given his background.
Totally. By all accounts, this guy is a really kind, grounded nurse working on New Zealand's North Island. Like a man of science and medicine.
Very analytical, usually.
Right. But during a shift, he meets an elderly Maori patient. And the story notes she possesses this profound sixth sense. And whatever she tells him during his shifts, it completely rewires his reality.
The transformation is immediate, and it's severe. I mean, he abandons his scientific worldview entirely.
Just drops it.
Yeah, and he becomes completely consumed by the supernatural. You really have to consider the psychological whiplash this causes his wife.
No, I can't even imagine.
Because she is a strict skeptic. She married a stable healthcare professional, and suddenly he's operating under a set of invisible magical rules that she cannot perceive.
Or validate in any way.
Exactly.
And the thing is, he forces the family to operate by those rules, too. That's where the constant moving comes in.
The packing up in the middle of the night.
Yeah, he starts receiving these mysterious scraps of paper, almost like coded warnings. And within days, the family is dragged to a new town.
Over and over.
Right. So Joe, who is 11 years old at the time, and his 8-year-old sister Gina, they're pulled out of school constantly. They have no friends, no roots.
Just constant paranoid transit, which, creates a profound vulnerability in these children. They are living in an ecosystem of perpetual anxiety, and it's entirely generated by their primary caretaker.
Which brings up a really good point. You're probably wondering right now, if a father is acting like his family is being hunted by monsters, won't his kids eventually start seeing monsters?
Right. The power of suggestion.
Exactly. I want to push back on the supernatural element early on here. Could the sheer stress of these paranoid relocations be the actual mechanism causing the paranormal visions the children start having?
It's highly likely.
Because if you tell an 11-year-old his house is a target, his brain is going to construct a threat to make sense of the fear, right?
It is a critical psychological lens to hold on to as we move forward. The tension in that house is basically a pressure cooker waiting to blow.
Yeah.
And that pressure peaks on one very specific night for young Joe. So he wakes up in the pitch black.
Okay.
The only light is this dim glow coming from downstairs. And he can hear his parents locked in a vicious, marriage-ending argument.
Ugh, that is so rough for a kid. So Joe creeps down the stairs, and he sits in the dark hallway, just listening to his family fundamentally fall apart.
Sitting there in the dark?
Right. And as he's sitting there, he hears footsteps approach from behind.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Someone sits down on the stair right next to him, shoulder to shoulder.
Terrifying.
He assumes it's his little sister, Gina, but when he turns his head, he is looking at an incredibly old woman
In the dark.
in the dark, and he describes her skin as being so deeply wrinkled and dark that it physically resembled tree bark.
Which is such a striking visual.
Huh.
In a standard ghost story, this is usually the moment of the jump scare, right?
Oh, 100%.
But the dynamic here is entirely different. This entity doesn't threaten him at all.
No.
She actually reaches out with her bark-like hands and gently covers Joe's ears, like physically muffling the sound of his parents destroying their marriage.
It is this bizarrely beautiful moment of maternal protection.
It really is.
But it's wrapped inside a completely terrifying visual. I mean, tree bark skin.
Yeah, that would scare anyone.
Definitely. And she introduces herself to Joe as Hinuite Po.
Which is so significant.
Yeah, she tells him she actually came looking for his father, but since his dad is busy fighting, she's just gonna leave.
The name she gives is exactly where the cultural mythology really slams into the narrative.
Tell us about that.
So, Hinuitepo is not a generic spirit. In traditional Maori cosmology, Hinuitepo is the goddess of night and death.
Wow.
She's the ultimate receiver of souls when they pass from the physical world. So the mechanism of this encounter is staggering.
Right.
Why is the cosmological figure of death appearing in a suburban staircase to cover a child's ears?
And specifically, seeking out a suburban nurse.
Yes.
It just changes the scale of what we are dealing with entirely. But, the immediate fallout of this encounter isn't mystical at all. It's just devastatingly human.
The divorce.
Yeah. Joe tells his parents what she saw. The dad views it as ultimate validation, like proof that he is crazy.
Of course he does.
But the mom, she views it as the final straw. She genuinely believes her husband is now actively inflicting his delusions onto their son's mind, so the marriage snaps. They divorce.
And the divorce creates this massive structural vacuum in the children's lives.
Yeah.
The eccentric, parentate father is suddenly gone. And because human nature abhors a vacuum, the mother quickly remarries to establish stability.
But it's not exactly the good kind of stability, is it?
No. The stability she chooses comes in the form of a hyper-rigid military stepdad.
He is the absolute inverse of their biological father. I mean, he turns their environment from chaotic but eccentric to just quiet and oppressive.
Very controlling.
Right. He institutes these synchronized eating rules at the dinner table, but the most damaging rule he enforces is banning their bedtime stories.
This is cruel.
It is. The biological dad used to tell them these really rich, sprawling Maori legends to help them sleep, and the stepdad just cuts them off entirely.
By stripping away those stories, the stepdad removes the children's primary coping mechanism. Because folklore isn't just entertainment for kids. It's a psychological framework they use to process the world.
That makes a lot of sense.
The mother obviously sees her children emotionally starving under this new regime. So, out of sheer desperation, she breaks the stepdad's rule.
Good for her.
Yeah, and she tells them one of the Maori legends their biological father used to recite.
But the story she chooses is incredibly specific, and honestly, it's incredibly violent.
It really is.
She tells them the legend of the twins. So, according to the source, there was a kind, beautiful older sister and a hot-headed, fiercely protective younger brother. A suitor comes to court the sister, a betrayal occurs, and the suitor brutally murders her.
And the mechanics of what happens next in the myth are vital to understanding this entire deep dive.
Okay, lay it out for us.
So, the sister's body is respectfully buried in the earth. In many indigenous frameworks, including traditional Maori belief, the earth is not just dirt or soil.
Right.
It is Papachunuku, the Earth Mother. Proper burial is a return to her embrace. It settles the spirit, and crucially, it leaves the door open for reincarnation. So the sister is at peace.
The brother, however, is not.
No, not at all.
He wants blood. He tracks down the suitor and sets his wooden house on fire to burn him alive, but the plan completely backfires.
It's tragic.
Yeah, the brother is trapped in his own flames and burns to death. And here's the really critical detail from the source. His remains are turned to ash and scattered to the wind.
And to scatter remains like that, rather than burying them, is to untether the soul from the Earth Mother.
Oh, wow.
Because the brother did not return to Papachunuku, he is locked out of the cycle of reincarnation. He is denied rebirth, so he's trapped permanently in a state of burning, violent fury.
Man, think about the psychology of the mother in this moment.
Yeah.
She is sitting in an oppressive house, dealing with a rigid, controlling new husband, And she chooses to soothe her children by telling them a story about a man who murders a woman and gets burned alive for it.
It's quite a choice.
Right. I mean, was she subconsciously preparing them for the chaos that was about to unfold? Here's where it gets really interesting, because it feels less like a bedtime lullaby and more like she was handing her children a blueprint for survival.
It really does act as an invocation. Because the children are stripped of their cultural bedtime stories, they start looking for physical replacements.
They need an anchor.
Exactly. They need a tangible connection to the comfort they lost, which perfectly explains why, during a very tense family vacation to a market in the city of Rotorua, a simple wooden carving becomes a dangerous focal point.
So, they are walking through this market, surrounded by indigenous crafts, and 8-year-old Gina spots a foot-tall wooden carving of a woman. The really striking detail is that the carving has these bright, piercing green stones set right into its eyes.
Very distinct.
Very. Gina begs for it. And in a totally out-of-character move, the strict, anti-fun stepdad actually agrees to buy it for her.
Which is weird.
Yeah, and the source notes he also buys a mysterious, unspecified item for himself at the exact same time.
This transaction fundamentally alters the spatial and spiritual ecology of their home.
How so?
Well, almost immediately after bringing the green-eyed carving back, Joe falls violently ill.
Oh, right.
He is bedridden with a fever so high his vision actually bleeds into gray. But in that delirious state, he perceives shadow figures circling his room.
Terrifying.
And one shadow, however, actively fights the others off. It sits by his bed, physically massages his muscles, and basically acts as a surrogate healer.
And when Joe's fever finally breaks, the shadow comes into focus. It is the old woman from the staircase.
The exact same one.
The entity with the bark-like skin. But this time, she doesn't introduce herself as the goddess of death. She gives Joe a completely different name. He remembers it sounding like Kayafina, a name with a hard V sound. And she doesn't leave. She becomes an invisible protective guardian for both Joe and Gina.
The household instantly bifurcates at this point.
Okay.
On one hand, the children are suddenly thriving. They are laughing, playing, and communicating with Kayafina. But we really have to look at the cost of this protection.
It wasn't free.
No. Introducing this artifact wasn't like putting up a shield. It was like introducing a non-native apex predator into an ecosystem to take care of a pest.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. It's like downloading a cursed app onto your phone. It creates a backdoor for ancient entities to access the family's network.
Exactly. It might protect the saplings, but it completely destabilizes the overall environment.
Because while the kids are glowing with health, the stepdad is rapidly, physically, and mentally deteriorating.
It's falling apart.
Yeah, his bedroom becomes this localized zone of dread. Kayafina explicitly warns the children, like, do not let a single foot cross into the shadows that spill out from the stepdad's doorway.
Very specific rules.
Right. And you have to wonder, is the artifact simply guarding the kids? Or is it actively draining the stepdad's life force to sustain itself?
The physical manifestations heavily suggest he is being actively targeted.
Yeah.
The stepdad begins suffering highly specific localized accidents. He repeatedly falls down the stairs.
Ouch.
He wakes up to find shattered glass inexplicably inside his bed sheets. And most terrifyingly, he wakes up with dark, oily soot smeared around his neck.
Like he's being choked.
Exactly. As if a pair of invisible charred hands were attempting to strangle him in his sleep.
And the timing of these attacks isn't random at all. They map flawlessly onto the lunar cycle.
Right.
The violence against the stepdad reaches an absolute peak on the night of the new moon, like when the sky is entirely moonless, because Kayafina's power to physically manifest drops to 0 on this night.
Now, earlier we asked if the paranormal events were just psychological manifestations, right?
Yeah, the stress theory.
It's very tempting to view the moonless night as just a metaphor for the stepdad's internal guilt finally overpowering the house's defenses.
Right, his own darkness taking over.
But we have to look at the cosmological framework of the source material. In the traditional Maori lunar calendar, the phases of the moon dictate energy and activity.
Oh, interesting.
The moonless phase, often associated with the lunar night of Wero, is traditionally linked to darker forces and negative energy. So it is not just a metaphor, it is a literal environmental prerequisite for an attack.
So the environment aligns and the attack happens. On this specific moonless night, a massive uproar erupts from the stepdad's room.
Total chaos.
Joe runs out into the hallway and faces pure spatial terror. Standing outside the stepdad's closed door is a massive 7-foot-tall entity.
Huge.
And it is completely charred black from head to toe like a corpse that just walked out of a bonfire.
And the entity is violently trying to breach the bedroom door.
Ugh.
And from somewhere in the dark periphery, Joe can hear Kayafina screaming at the entity in Maori. She's desperately trying to verbally hold back a force she no longer has the physical power to stop.
Wow. And if we pull the thread from the mother's bedtime story, the identity of this attacker is glaringly obvious.
It's the brother.
Exactly. The burnt spirit is the vengeful younger brother, the one who was denied reincarnation.
Yes.
And this leads to an inevitable collision in broad daylight. So the mother and the babysitter are outside. Joe is upstairs, and he watches as thick, black, sooty footprints physically bleed up through the fibers of the hallway carpet.
The spiritual realm is now fully manifesting in the physical space. There's no separation left.
None.
The stepdad bursts out of his bedroom, and he's completely unhinged. In his hands, he is holding the wooden carving Gina bought, the female doll with the green eyes.
He's thrusting it out in front of him, but he's not holding it like a Catholic priest wielding a crucifix against a vampire.
No, it's destined.
Yeah, he's trying to use a magnet to repel a speeding freight train. He might have the right theoretical tool, but the sheer scale of the spiritual momentum bearing down on him is completely overwhelming.
Right.
So in a moment of sheer panic, the stepdad hurls the wooden doll onto the floor.
It shatters. The green stone eyes pop out of the wood and roll across the floorboards.
I know.
And the millisecond that artifact breaks, Joe hears Kayafina let out an agonizing final scream.
Because he broke her anchor.
Exactly. The stepdad destroyed the only physical barrier maintaining the stalemate. The charred spirit instantly surges forward and engulfs him.
Joe grabs Gina, and they barely escape out the front door. They look back, and the house is consumed.
It's gone.
But Joe notes a vital detail. There are no visible orange flames. There's only thick, suffocating, pitch-black smoke violently pouring out of every window and door frame.
And this is where the narrative loops back on itself in the most tragically ironic way possible.
Yeah.
Two cars pull up to the burning house simultaneously. One is the mother, and the other is the biological father.
The irony is just heartbreaking. The man who spent his entire life researching these indigenous myths, the man who alienated his wife and uprooted his children to chase supernatural artifacts.
He arrives right at the climax.
Right. He arrives just in time to see the supernatural fire manifest in his reality. And without a second of hesitation, he sprints directly into the black smoke to try and save the man who replaced him.
But the mechanics of the myth demand a conclusion.
Yeah.
The father is too late. The stepdad dies in the fire. When his body is recovered, it is charred completely black, sizzled and burnt to a crisp in a way that perfectly mimics the ancient smoke-filled demise of the brother from the legend.
Wow. The biological dad survives, though he suffers severe smoke inhalation.
Right.
And later, while they are recovering at the hospital, the story drops an impossible detail. The mom reaches into her purse and pulls out the green-eyed doll.
Intact.
Fully intact. The green stones are perfectly set back into the unblemished wood. She assumes one of the kids grabbed it during the escape.
But Joe knows they didn't. He watched it shatter. It is as if the artifact physically reset its own form once its brutal purpose was fulfilled.
Which is just chilling. You would think that a destroyed house and a dead stepdad would be the end of the line.
You'd hope so.
Yeah. But the biological father's ultimate secret reveals exactly why this specific family was chosen as the battleground.
The final puzzle piece.
Once he recovers, the dad takes young Joe to the backyard of their temporary new home, and he is holding a small shovel.
And he is holding a second doll.
Right.
It is a wooden carving of a man, also featuring green stones for eyes. But this carving is made from wood that has been heavily, deeply scorched by fire. He buries the second doll deep in the dirt. He looks at Joe and tells him he must remember this exact spot. Because one day, Joe will be required to bury the female doll right next to it.
The dad finally lays out the theory he has been chasing his entire life, and it is completely mind-bending.
It really recontextualizes everything.
It does. The dolls were not generic craft. They were made from incredibly specific, localized materials. The female doll, the one Gina bought at the Rotorua market, was carved from the wood of the specific tree that grew over the buried body of the murdered older sister.
And the male doll, the heavily scorched one the father possessed, was carved from a tree that grew out of the soil where the vengeful younger brother's ashes had been scattered to the wind centuries ago.
Which means the stepdad was not just an unfortunate guy who moved into a haunted house.
No.
The dad's theory posits that the stepdad was the literal reincarnation of the suitor from the myth. the man who originally murdered the sister.
Yes.
His horrific, smoke-filled death in that hallway wasn't a random haunting. It was inescapable karmic revenge, the universe violently balancing its scales.
It is a fascinating cultural syncretism. Jane, the caller sharing this story from Thailand, is likely taking the Maori concept of utu, which refers to reciprocity, balance, and the settling of spiritual debts, and naturally filtering it through her own cultural lens of Buddhist karma.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, it creates this incredible narrative where indigenous artifacts are used to settle a karmic debt across multiple lifetimes.
But this forces us to ask a deeply uncomfortable question about the biological father.
Right.
If he knew about the dolls, and he knew about the prophecy from his elderly Maori patient years ago, why didn't he warn his family clearly?
That's the big question.
Right. Why speak in riddles and scraps of paper? Was he actively trying to protect them, or was he an unwitting pawn in a supernatural revenge plot, simply moving the pieces into place so the brother could finally execute the suitor?
It is highly probable he felt entirely bound by fate.
Yeah.
When you deeply internalize a prophecy, you often believe the karmic cycle is inevitable.
Yeah.
He likely felt he couldn't stop the collision. He could only try to manage the collateral damage to his children.
That's so tragic.
And there's a poignant, quiet closure to his lifelong obsession. The biological father eventually passes away peacefully in a hospital bed. And Joe notes a chilling piece of timing. The day his father died was the exact same day Joe saw Kayafina for the very last time. Her contractual duty was done.
So as an adult, Joe fulfills his promise. He takes the green-eyed female doll, goes out to that yard, and buries it right next to the scorched male doll.
Completing the cycle.
Yes. By burying them together in the earth, he reunites the brother and sister in Papachinuku. He is finally giving the brother the proper burial he was denied centuries ago, effectively unlocking the door for the brother's soul to enter the cycle of reincarnation.
It operates as a profound resolution to a generational trauma. The physical family suffered immensely, but they served as the necessary bridge for an ancient mythology to play out its final balancing act.
They really did. And Jane, the caller, makes a very important point at the end of her broadcast. She reminds the audience that despite this incredibly dark, terrifying history, New Zealand is a place of breathtaking beauty and rich, vibrant culture.
Absolutely.
You shouldn't let a story of ancient vendettas eclipse the wonder and deep spiritual history of the landscape.
The landscape and the culture are deeply intertwined. That powerful connection to the earth, the understanding that the ground beneath you holds memory and weight, is something to be revered.
We've unpacked the mechanisms, the artifacts were buried, the spiritual scales were balanced. But Joe recently shared one final, terrifying update to this saga.
This is the part that gets me.
Yeah, a few years ago, as an adult, he decided to go back to that specific yard. He took a shovel and dug into the earth right where he buried those twin dolls to check on them.
Right.
And he found absolutely nothing. The earth was completely empty. Both dolls had vanished without a trace.
Artifacts tied to that level of concentrated historical power do not just dissolve into the soil.
Exactly. So as we wrap up, think about what happens when you disturb an ecosystem. If those twin dolls vanish from the ground on their own, does that mean their karmic cycle of revenge is finally satisfied and they simply faded away? Or are they currently migrating, making their way into the hands of the next set of reincarnated souls who are walking around a market right now entirely unaware of the ancient sins they are about to pay for? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been an incredible journey. Keep questioning the history you inherit.